New Year's. Everyone survived New Year's. Yeah, yeah. We survived some of the crazies on about a block over from us that shoot off fireworks, and they seem to explode only about 10 feet in the air, and they're huge. So we survived that. Well, yeah, we're going to look at New Year's again. Wait, we did that last week. I know, but last week talking about New Year's was important because I needed to cement in place that in my New Year in 2026 we're talking about bacon. So we got that done with. So we're going to move on to something else, but we're going to talk about New Year because looking forward really is it's a really healthy thing to do. So we're going to continue to look forward today, but we're going to look really far forward today. This is a picture of the Grand Canyon and those little coin operated telescopes. Remember those? You'd put a coin in, they made this funny kind of sound as they're kind of going, and the telescopes were horrible. I mean, they were horrible. It's just nasty. But I look at this because what I want to do is today is not just look forward in 2026, but look way out. I mean, look out like way beyond 2026. I mean, we're talking about super far out, not just 2026, which is my kind of sneaky way to say we're going to go back today and we're going to finish off what we've been looking at in the book of Daniel. Well, wait a second. Didn't we finish Daniel? No, actually we came short, and I'll show you how far short we came. But what we left behind, we're going to finish it today, but what we left behind is actually one of the most fantastic visions he has. If you recall, last time we looked at Daniel was before Dorothy and I went out of town for 2 months. So that was like September. It's right around Peach Days was the last time we saw this. So let me just catch up again. Daniel has in it 4 visions, and the 4 visions from God. They're interspersed in the narrative of Daniel's life. Remember, early on in Daniel, you got this great narrative about his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, all that kind of stuff, and Daniel in the lion's den. So you have these stories, but interspersed in the stories of Daniel, you have these visions. There's 4 visions in Daniel. So here's the trivia question. If someone in Bible trivia says, how many visions are there in Daniel? There's 4. Okay. Well, we never got to number 4. So we used to come every morning, we'd spin the vision wheel, we'd say, which vision are we going to look at today? And in September, we said, we'll look at vision 4. But we just scratched the surface on it. We didn't actually get to the guts of it. So we're going to get to the guts of it today. And it looks forward in time all the way to the end of time. It's a very important vision, but it's also involved. So I hope you're up for a little adventuring because we're going to adventure into it today. And there's just absolutely no way we're going to be able to finish the whole thing. People have been debating this 4th vision of Daniel for millennia. I mean, it's a meaty thing. So we're just going to get exposed to it. And if it's your cup of tea, you can spend some more time with it, but we'll take a look. So the 4 visions, this 4th vision actually occupies 3 chapters. There's only 12 chapters in Daniel, which means that a quarter of the chapters in Daniel are about this vision. It's a really, really big deal. Are we going to cover 3 chapters today? Yes and no. It's just a chunk. But we started it. We started chapter 10, and this is how we started chapter 10 back in September. We looked at the beginning of this section, and he gives us in the very first verse actually a summary statement of the 3 chapters. And here's his summary statement. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a word was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar. Remember, that's his Persian name, actually his Babylonian name. And the word was true, and it was a great conflict. Let me just say that again. It was a great conflict. And he understood the word and had understanding of the vision. That's actually a summary statement for the 3 chapters. So we could stop here and then have lunch because it's about a great conflict. Well, we're going to look at the conflict right now. But this conflict was so great, it caused him a huge amount of emotional damage. And this is what we looked at last time, because I'm convinced that in seeing this vision, he didn't see just kind of like a metaphoric vision, like the visions he had before. If you remember some of the earliest ones, there was that gigantic statue that had different metals. There was a different metal for the head and for the chest. Remember that? And it represented the ongoing kingdoms all the way from Babylon all the way to Rome. Remember that? So it wasn't really a scary vision per se. It was like something you'd see in a museum. It was just a statue with different metals. This one, however, there are no symbolic images in this one. I believe, and this is I'm persuaded by the fact that what Daniel saw in the vision you're going to see coming up in a second was he saw in real life, he saw the conflict that will accelerate to the end of mankind's existence. And he saw all the death all the destruction. He basically saw, from a biblical perspective, the worst apocalyptic vision he could ever see. Now, if you think about it, if you think about the fact that there is great trouble coming to mankind, and you'll see that what's coming right here. But can you imagine having that run in fast forward in front of your eyes until you see every bad thing that can happen, horrible destruction and great conflict, he said, to the end of time. It would mess you up forever if you saw what's coming. And I believe that's what Daniel digested when he saw this vision coming up. We're going to take a look at it. And that's why, as we looked at it originally in chapter 10, why he was so disturbed. It says in verse 2, in those days, I, Daniel, was mourning for 3 weeks. It put him into a 3-week funk. I mean, he was just out of it by what he had seen. I ate no delicacies, no meat or wine entered my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all for the full 3 weeks. By the way, that's rich food stuff he's talking about. That's actually privileged food. He is a high-placed leader of the Persian Empire at the time. He's been placed in administrative control of most of Persia. He's a well-respected guy. So he says, I didn't do any of that stuff. I couldn't do anything. I didn't even anoint myself. That's what you do. Well, we do that when we have, when you take a shower and then you anoint yourself. Anoint yourself is taking nice smelling perfumey stuff, and you make yourself look good. You put a little oil in your hair, he would, stuff like that. He said, I didn't do any of that stuff. I didn't do any of that stuff. For 3 weeks, he was just out of it. That's how powerful this vision was that we're just going to dip our toe in it today. And on the 24th day of the first month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, that is the Tigris, which still exists today, by the way, in the Mesopotamian Valley. It's in Iraq. So it's there on the Tigris. I lifted up my eyes and I looked. Now, this is still recap from last September. I lifted up my eyes and I looked, and behold, there was a man clothed in linen. So think of this guy in like a white robe. That's what you think with this, like a light colored robe. Clothed in linen with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like beryl. His face like the appearance of lightning. His eyes like flaming torches. His arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze. And the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude. Like a multitude. So he's seeing, as he's standing out by the large river Tigris, he's seeing this being, this man-like being, who presumably is just out at the river, either floating over the water, we don't know, but he's out there. Daniel's outside. He sees this guy who clearly does not look humanoid, but he's not human because, there's some weird stuff going on with this guy. But I want you, see where I have that little asterisk right there? I want you to compare that description with the description in Revelation 1, if you get some time. We won't have time to do that right now, but it's almost identical. And in Revelation 1, that really unearthly vision that he sees right there in Revelation 1 is deliberately Jesus. It says it clearly right there. So could this being that Daniel's seeing over the river be Jesus? Well, it would match the Revelation 1 account perfectly. So this could be the pre-incarnate Jesus. So he sees this man there. I'm going to skip down a little bit. Verse 7, and I, Daniel, alone saw the vision. For the men who were with me didn't see the vision, but a great trembling fell upon them, and they fled to hide themselves. So they didn't see it, but something really spooked them out really bad as well. This is why Daniel is so perturbed about what's going on here. So I was left alone, and I saw the great vision, and no strength was left in me. My radiant appearance was fearfully changed, and I retained no strength. So again, he reiterates for us at the beginning of this section, before he even gets to the vision, that this has just totally emotionally wrecked him. Now, he'll continue to go through in chapter 10 and describe his emotional reaction all the way through chapter 10 about how disturbing, how really disturbing this is. And again, this is where I assert, I think in a real way, Daniel had a view forward into the future where he actually saw an apocalyptic earth that goes through gigantic destruction and death. I think he saw it. Nasty, 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 nasty. But why? Why would God subject someone to seeing that kind of grotesque end of mankind? The destruction, the wars, the death, all the mayhem. I remember my closest analog to this is I remember looking at a lot of history of World War II. My dad fought in World War II like many men his age. And you look at places after the war, not just places like Hiroshima or Nagasaki where big bombs were done, but even in vast parts of Europe, Dresden, the firebombing at Dresden. I mean, and you look at what's left, and it's just apocalyptic wastelands. And the death and destruction that happens during all those things, you can only imagine. I think Daniel had a gigantic dose of the most cruel issues and times of mankind. And that's what he sees. And that's why he can barely handle it right here. Well, we are going to go past his emotional reactions and actually dive in new today right here at what he saw and what's going on. So it's not going to be quite as troubling because a lot of the details of the visions aren't put there, but the explanation of them is. So that's what we're going to look at. And we're going to go through it relatively quickly. I just want to expose you to it, but we'll see what's there. So now this man, who I will actually say is the pre-incarnate Jesus, says to Daniel in chapter 11, verse 2, and now I will show you the truth. I'll show you what it is you just saw, and I'll interpret for you what you just saw. So this is what he does. This is the big fourth vision of Daniel. Well, to kind of shorten this, since we don't have time to do a whole thing, I took it and I subdivided the vision into 3 sections, okay? And they're actually, this is in order of the 3 sections we'll see there. They're in also historical order. They're chronological. So on the far left, you see over there, it starts in 1 and 2, and it talks about the Persian Empire. Well, Daniel is sitting in the Persian Empire right now. He's actually administrating in the Persian Empire. And by verse 2 of chapter 11, the Persian Empire is no more. It comes to an end, and you can read it for yourself. I encourage you to do that, where it talks about the end of the Persian Empire and the kings that ended up coming after Cyrus and all those guys. It just predicts the end of the Persian Empire. Well, what ended the Persian Empire? Alexander the Great ended the Persian Empire. Alexander the Great comes out of Macedonia, which is northern Greece. He whomps across everything that's eastward from him right there. And he takes over, he goes all the way to India, goes into India, goes up into the Mongol regions. I mean, and everything in between, including Egypt. Alexander the Great was called Alexander the Great because he took over the world in a whirlwind. And then as he's coming back from the furthest reaches of that campaign, he dies in Babylon from some natural thing in his early 30s, and he's dead. And then the kingdom that's been conquered by the Greeks, by this guy, Alexander the Great, it gets subdivided. Not usually it would go to his descendants. It would go to a son or something like that. Well, he doesn't have any kids. So who does it go to? His 4 generals. So the Greek Empire, which now extends all the way from Greece down to Egypt and then eastward all the way to India, the whole Babylon Valley, I mean the entire 9 yards, it gets subdivided by his 10 generals, and they take over pieces of it. You know probably some of the names of them. The general that took over Egypt was Ptolemy, the Ptolemies. That was one of the generals. And then there was a general that took over everything back in Greece, back around Macedon and Greek. There was a guy who took over all of Turkey, Antigonid, who was him. And then there was a guy who took over all of the eastern stuff, everything from like where Syria is today, all the way eastward, all the way to India. Huge swath. And that's the Seleucids. So you might have heard those names before. So those 4 generals, they subdivide. And then this next section then is all about that. It's all about this extended Greek empire that happened after Alexander died. Now, Daniel's vision in chapter 11 describes this sequence of history for this Greek empire until its very end. And it's very detailed. It's very detailed. So I'm not going to burden you with that today, but it's clearly in the future, because look at this. Let me get the timeline straight. Alexander the Great was doing his conquering for about a decade, from 330 to 320 BC, somewhere around there. He died in 323 BC for about a decade. When we open this, did you see the date that I put on there about when this whole thing starts? He says during Cyrus. Well, that's around 537. So we are now at this point with Alexander. That's 200 years in the future from when Daniel is writing. It's 200 years in the future. And it talks about, in chapter 11, the coming of this great king who would take over the whole world. It talks about Alexander the Great without naming him. But it's very clear that's what we're talking about. And then the 4 generals' kingdoms after that. And that's what this whole section in this blue section does. It talks about everything about the Greek Empire, which basically takes over the world. Takes over the world. And you know, a couple weeks ago when we did Hanukkah, remember when we talked about Hanukkah? Hanukkah on this time scale is right here. Judah Maccabee, who was a Jew who did a rebellion against the Greeks who had taken over that part of Israel, right? The Greeks, and specifically the Eastern Greeks that went all the way to India, the Seleucid Greeks, which includes Syria all the way to India. So what they were fighting, what Judah Maccabee was fighting, was the occupation of the leftovers of Alexander the Great's kingdom, run by the Seleucid king Antiochus IV. So that's this whole event right here. It happens very late, and that's 164. So the timeline here is very broad, in fact, it turns out. But Daniel's vision in chapter 11 covers that entire history hundreds of years before it happens. Hundreds of years before it happens. And it's quite detailed. It's so detailed, in fact, that critics of the Bible, if they want to criticize Daniel, they'll say, it's impossible this guy could know this detail like this. So, hundreds of years beforehand. Daniel's writing in roughly 530 BC. All the Greek stuff happens up to about 160. How can he know all of that blue section? But it's there in chapter 11. So if you're a history buff and you want to compare it, go take a look at it. It's quite detailed. But unless you're really a history buff, you're not going to get too much out of that section of it. But at the end of this, at the end of the Greek section in chapter 11, after this revolt from the Jews right here, a strange thing happens in the narrative of the vision. Because what would you think is be the next large major kingdom of the world after the Greeks? Rome, exactly. In fact, that vision I told you about where he saw the statue with the different metals, the bottom of the feet was clearly Rome. It was iron mixed with clay. It was kind of a powerful kingdom, but it was iron, which means it was impenetrable, but it was mixed with clay, which meant it was separated and vulnerable in many other ways. It's clearly Rome. But in this particular case, although he covers Greece really well, he never talks about Rome. In fact, this last red section up there is not about Rome at all. He suddenly segues into something that's much worse. And what he segues into is the Antichrist. What? So there's like a gap between these. And he suddenly started. So what we're going to look at today is not all the Greek history. I just gave you as much Greek history as you're probably going to want for the rest of your life. But we're going to look at the Antichrist section. Really? Yeah. And you'll see why we think it's the Antichrist, because it is so clearly different from what was really detailed history that matches the secular history we know. But then suddenly you take a breath and we're talking about someone who's so incredibly, horribly bad, it takes your breath away. And this is what disturbs him so badly. You want to look at it? Okay, here we go. Starts in verse 36. Notice how over the top suddenly this gets. Verse 36 of chapter 11. And the king shall do as he wills. He shall exalt himself, magnify himself above every god, and shall speak astonishing things against the God of gods. The God of gods is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So this is someone who actually repudiates the God of Israel, the gods of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he shall prosper till the indignation is accomplished. The indignation is accomplished? A big bad thing is going to happen. For what is decreed shall be done. So according to the vision, this big bad thing that's going to happen from this guy is decreed. It has to happen. It's already on the history books ahead of time. So that's going to have to happen. 37, he shall pay no attention to the gods of his fathers or to the one beloved by women. Okay, now I expect a few raised eyebrows as we go along, because you're going to go, I don't know what that means. Okay, we'll take some stabs, because this is the stuff that very academic people have been arguing about this for years. But here's the consensus on what was just said right there. This one about he shall pay no attention to the gods of his fathers, we think that means that the Antichrist actually is a Jew. Now that's maybe an 80% guess, but that's not a bad guess. So what about this thing that comes after it? Or the one beloved by women? Oh, there's a lot of debate on that one. But maybe 60 or 70% of researchers look at that and they say, I think they're talking about the Messiah. And there's good reasons why that phraseology is connected to that. So we're talking about Jesus here. So what he's saying is that this guy, this big bad guy, perhaps is a Jew, because he's going to pay no attention to the God of his fathers, and he's going to be against the Messiah, is what that second phrase seems. Go crazy looking at this yourself, but this is what it looks like. Okay, but he goes on. He shall not pay attention to any other god, for he shall magnify himself above all. Above all. Even Alexander the Great had some religious inklings to him. I mean, there were false gods from Macedonia, but you don't see anyone who says, I'm against all gods. In fact, I'm above all of them. This is why this really goes over the top when we think this is the Antichrist. 38, he shall honor the God of fortresses instead of these. The God of fortresses. Yeah, he'll basically honor might. That's what it means, God of fortresses. Might. A God whom his fathers did not know, he shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones, costly gifts. So he will be kind of a religious guy, but he'll be worshiping gods of power and might. But not really. He's worshiping himself. He's a complex guy. He shall deal with the strongest fortresses with the help of a foreign god. And those who acknowledge him, he shall load with honor. He shall make them rulers over many and shall divide the land for a price. So he's clearly he's on a conquest to conquer the world. And he makes allies as he goes. And he promises that if you work with me as we take over this part of the world, I'll give you a piece of this. Maybe it'll cost you a price. Give me some gold. You can be in charge of this area. So this guy has world domination in his sights. That's what he's doing. And he finds people to help him in the entire time. 40. So at the time of the end of everything, that's what this phrase means. So the end of humanity. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, but the king of the north shall rush upon him like a whirlwind with chariots and horsemen with many ships. Now, if you're having Revelation flashbacks right here, it's because this is exactly the same language as you see in Revelation. Exactly. And we have warfare going on a vast scale. On a vast scale. So who is the king of the south? Who is the king of the north? We don't know. All we know is this guy has put himself in the place of taking over the world. And suddenly some kings who don't like the idea of their kingdoms being taken over, they decided to kind of come down and take care of this guy. Someone from the south, someone from the north. Who it is? This is what the debates have been for centuries. It's really fun to think about. But it's clear this guy, if it is the Antichrist, is going to be so domineering and so ambitious in taking over the world that the kings of the world will try and take this guy down. That he'll be seen as a threat worldwide. And he shall come into countries, that's the worldwide ambitions. He shall come into countries and shall pass and shall overflow and pass through them. So he comes into countries, he's not resisted hard enough, he just basically pushes right through them. That's how powerful he is. He wants to take over the world, he enters the countries, and he just flows through like a river flowing that cannot be stopped. And he shall come into the glorious land. Wow. What's the glorious land? Israel. Israel. He'll come into Israel too. It's interesting, the phrasing right here. I mean, he's got ambitions to take over the entire world, and he comes into countries and he just pushes through it like a flood. It comes in and it overflows out on the other side. And then, oh, by the way, he's going to come into Israel. He's going to come into the glorious land. And when he does this, he's going to make a gigantic mistake. Because he's come into the land that God says is mine, and he gives to Israel. Okay, so there's an Israel connection to this world conquest. Anyway, as he goes on, tens of thousands shall fall, but these shall be delivered out of his hand: Edom and Moab, and the main part of the Ammonites. Well, that's kind of an interesting statement. What is that area we're talking about? Well, the classic area biblically where Edom and Moab and Ammon is basically the arid regions, everything that's east of the Jordan River. So we're talking present-day Jordan, present-day Saudi Arabia, all those things. So for some reason, this guy sets up his ambitions for the world, but these people that live east of the Jordan River are going to be spared. For some reason. Maybe they're in cahoots with him. We don't know. Again, talk to the academics about this. But it's a strange thing. Every country he goes into, he overflows through. But these guys have been delivered. I don't know why. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. the land of Egypt, which at the time of Daniel has been there a long time. They are a big player on the world stage. Egypt has always been there. They're there. The pyramids are there standing at the time. I mean, they're a big deal. So when Egypt goes, you're talking about someone who's more powerful than Egypt, which at the time, people's jaws would drop. He's more powerful than Egypt. Who's more powerful than Egypt? This guy is. And this guy who's moved into Israel to run his operations. He shall become ruler of the treasures of gold and of silver and all the precious things of Egypt. And the Libyans and the Cushites shall follow in his trail. So not only did he come and he take over Egypt, but he's going to haul away everything that's of value in Egypt. I mean, that's just gobsmackingly amazing. This guy is extremely powerful. And then he also adds on the end of this list 2 other places. He adds to this the Libyans. I always think of the movie Back to the Future when I see that phrase. Right? It was the Libyans that were in the van in the parking lot. What, yeah, okay, never mind. I'm great at distraction. So the Libyans and the Cushites. Well, Libya is where Libya is today. It's that big country on the top of Africa on the Mediterranean Sea. Libya is Libya. It's Libya. It's always been Libya. So for some reason, Libya is going to be following his train, which means they're either in cahoots or they're being taken over by him. We're not sure based on the language, but it lists Libya and the Cushites. Cush is an interesting phrase. It's used a lot in the Bible, the region of Cush. Originally, the region of Cush, it's easily connected to one of the sons of Noah in terms of where people settled. And classically, Cush has been thought of being the area that's just south of Egypt, which would be today Sudan, I think. I don't know if is that correct? That's Sudan. Okay, Sudan. So anyway, it's the region just south of Egypt, still in the Red Sea. And then some people conjecture that it actually goes further down than that in Africa. But I mean, not just to Sudan, but Sudan into Ethiopia, and then Ethiopia keep aiming towards the Indian Ocean, kind of southeast, even down to Somalia. So that whole region, right there. But then it turns out that the people in that region, the classic region of Cush, moved. And you know where they moved to? Iraq and Saudi Arabia. So Cush right here, most probably 80% sure refers to Iraq and Saudi Arabia. Yes, they would be surrounding. Yeah. That's one of my questions too. I don't know. That's a great question. But he's clearly describing real geography right here. This isn't just symbolic geography. We're talking about real worldwide conquests, people that ally with him, people who are let go, the Edomites and the Moabites, people who are caught up. Egypt is clearly against him. It gets taken over. This Saudi-Iraq area, following his train, whether that means they get wrecked or they're with him, we're not sure. I mean, so this is what's important to notice right here. This is a description of a real worldwide takeover by somebody who seems to start its base in Israel now and involves regions all around. Kings of the north could actually mean Russian areas. In a second, we'll see kings of the east as well. So anyway, this is a real world conquest that's going on. This is no small scale thing. But news from the east and the north shall alarm him. Russia and China? Maybe. I don't know. But he's clearly in the Israeli area, so east and north. It alarms him. Why? Because they have large armies and they're powerful. And so he shall go out with great fury to destroy and devote many to destruction. So as the news comes from these threats from the north and the east, instead of waiting for it to come on his doorstep, he goes out and he takes them out. He goes out and he takes them out. He takes out the threat before it even gets there. And he devotes many to destruction. And I think this many that are devoted to destruction that so graphically in the vision caused Daniel to have upset tummy. Yeah, Doug. It does. Yeah, it does. Yeah, that's a huge point of discussion, that very thing. So, we're just being exposed to it. You can start your theories going right now. Yeah. Yes. Ethiopia is the classic area of Cush. Yeah. Yeah. Ethiopia, just south of Egypt. Yeah. Because you do Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia. That's right. Thank you. Pete's got it. Egypt. Someone go over the map. No. Yeah. Egypt, Ethiopia, Sudan, Somalia. That's right. Around the horn. Okay. Whew. Good man. Egypt, Ethiopia, Sudan, Somalia to the coast. Okay. Whew. Well, anyway, my point is, and this is a good point. I mean, this is real geography. That's all I'm trying to say. This is not fake geography. This is not just a symbolic war. This is a worldwide conquest in progress. He's seeing right here in Daniel. We don't know. Don't know. But almost every scholar looks at the scope of this campaign and says, this is the Antichrist. This is not somebody else. In fact, the scope of this is so unlike anything that we've known in world history to this moment that we say this can't have happened already. This is still coming. Yeah. Okay. Now here, watch this. And he shall pitch his palatial tents between the sea and the glorious holy mountain. Between the sea, Mediterranean, and the holy mountain, Israel, Jerusalem. Jerusalem, the temple of Jerusalem is built on Mount Moriah. That's called the holy mountain. So he has pitched his tent. He's put his worldwide headquarters. His worldwide headquarters are somewhere in the middle of Israel. And some scholars look at this and say, well, it's very likely based on some of the language in Revelation. When you hear the term Armageddon, Har-Megiddo, the Valley of Megiddo. The Valley of Megiddo is it's a real place. I've been there. It's in Israel. You can go to the ruins at Megiddo today. It's been for centuries and centuries. It's been a military outpost because it's right on a gigantic plain, flat plain that connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Jordan River Valley that goes up and down. So it's a place where when there's been conflicts in the past outside of Israel, they would come down the Megiddo Valley. And so it would make sense that this would be where he's stationed. It would fit the description. Because the ultimate battle at the end of time in Revelation is in the Megiddo Valley. This is exactly where this would be. So he shall pitch his palatial tents. I like that, the palatial tents. I don't know what the other versions say when they say palatial tents, but what he's trying to say is that he has a considerable headquarters. Not just a couple tents, not just like field stations. His worldwide headquarters, his very center of operations is right there in Israel. That's where he's planted himself. Yet he shall come to his end with none to help him. Woohoo! But it does raise the question, how did that happen? It seems like he was invincible. It seems like, well, how did that happen? The next verse explains how that happened. At that time shall arise Michael. Now you can cheer. Okay. At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince who has charge of your people. So he's an angel. We see him show up in other parts of Daniel. How he explains, he was fighting some guys and stuff like that. They're actually in a spiritual war. Michael's one of the powerful ones. And what he says right here in this passage is that Michael has been assigned to the nation of Israel. He's talking to Daniel, and he's talking to Daniel, your people. So he's saying, although this bad guy is going to be bivouacked permanently, it's central in the middle of Israel, your people in Israel will be safe from this guy because Michael will finally engage. So this battle, although it's a geopolitical battle as real as anyone we've ever seen, it also mimics a spiritual battle in a huge sense that involves people like Michael. The great prince who has charge of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble. Well, we're cheering, but now, wait a second. Now we're still into huge conflict as he takes down this guy who lives in Israel. This is what the duration of that process, even when Michael is involved, is happening. There shall be a time of trouble such as never has been since there was a nation till that time. And Bible scholars call this the Great Tribulation, because that's how it's described other places. So this battle, even when Michael comes on the scene and he starts to engage this guy who's bivouacked in Israel, it's still going to be nasty. So he's going to tell us about the nastiness of this battle that's going to go on right here. And it'll be a horrible time of trouble. And again, I think this is part of what disturbed Daniel so badly, is he got a real live vision into that time of trouble. It'll be horrible. And if you want to see what I'm talking about, right there, Matthew 24, see what Jesus calls this time in Matthew 24:21. And just go look at it, and keep your finger in Daniel 12 and flip over that and look at it and just compare that. You'll see that they're nearly identical. And this is the living Jesus telling his disciples about what's going to come in the end. And he talks about a time of terrible trouble. Daniel puts it right here in the midst of the Antichrist and Michael. Okay, but at that time, your people shall be delivered. Woohoo! By the way, it doesn't mean they necessarily won't die. But from a spiritual perspective, they're saved, and there's a resurrection after that. Almost all the scholars agree with that, because there's other places that says that there will be many that die, and no one's immune. But look how he says this. At that time, your people shall be delivered. Everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. Well, that's a euphemism that's used in the Old Testament a lot for those who have been saved by God. Their name's been written in the book. It's kind of a symbol of a permanent thing. Your name has been written in permanent ink in a book. It cannot be erased. So those people whose names cannot be erased because they're part of God's people, they'll be delivered. And in the end, after all this ends, they will be. Even after all the geopolitical warfare stops, they'll be delivered. That's what he's saying. Verse 2, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Well, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Doesn't that sound familiar? So this is what gives us the idea that this is also the Antichrist at the end, because the culmination of these gigantic geopolitical conflicts is going to end with judgment. And at that judgment, everyone will rise, the great and the small, the dead as well, they'll rise and judgment will happen. And so it's like right on the heels of this end of mankind conflict with Michael and this Antichrist. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Wow. And he goes on. This is why it tells us this is the end of mankind. And those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above. But those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. Those who are wise. You know who the wise ones are, I think? It's the people at that time who will read this book and they'll say, I know it's coming. I know what's going down. I get it. Wisdom is biblically is knowledge that's applied to a circumstance. It's not just knowledge, it's knowledge that engages, that has traction in the spot. In a second here, God's going to tell Daniel to seal this book up for the end. So it could very well be that we may not be able to make total heads or tails about what's going on here. But if you find yourself at this time, you will be referring to this and go, okay, I know what's coming. I know what's happening. I know what's going on. But what he says here is really an encouraging thing too. The last half of this, those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. So if you find yourself caught up in the midst of this gigantic, horrible destruction, mayhem, and evil manifest, and you're actually turning people toward righteousness, toward good, well, you'll be like a star in the heavens. So there actually is a possibility during this time that it's not all doom and gloom, that there's a bright side with people talking about what righteousness is all about. So as the world bemoans the fact that there are people in high places of power who are abusing their power, and they're using it purely to destroy people and to bring evil on top of people, and that's all you can talk about isn't that king evil? Isn't that guy horrible? Did you see what their troops did? All that kind of bad stuff. If you're saying, yeah, but wait a second, let's talk about righteousness. Let's talk about love. Let's talk about consideration. Let's talk about caring. Let's talk about the good side instead of just the bad side. So he says those people will actually, in the midst of that mayhem, will shine like stars. Now that's a nice admonition to us as well, because although our circumstance isn't as bad as this, still there's plenty to complain about here. There's a lot of injustice that goes on. There's a lot of death that goes on. A lot of death. There's a lot of mayhem and pain and suffering that goes on. And many of it comes from people that are in power that should not be in power. They use that power not for the benefit of the people they're in charge of, but for their bad, for their evil. I mean, and it gives you enough to talk about around the potluck table to say, gosh, the world seems to be going to hell. Well, it is. There's a lot of evil here. That's not news to us. Not news to us. But what a breath of fresh air. What like a starlight it is to sit and talk about how wondrous good is, what righteousness is. In contrast to that, you will be a contrasting star in darkness. You'll be a pinpoint of light, just like the stars are a contrast of a pinpoint of light in a totally black background. So things are starting to be encouraging at this point. But you, Daniel, shut up. Well, shut up the words and then seal the book until the end of time. So what he's saying, God knows that as he's showing him these things, maybe actually the pre-incarnate Jesus is showing him these things, that Daniel's head is just swimming. He does not know what's going on. And so what he tells him is, it's okay, because what you need to do, write these things down and then seal it up, put it in a time capsule, which is what the Bible is in a real sense. And these people at the end, they'll get it. They'll need to know this. That's what it means, seal it up. They'll get it. So you may not get it right now, Daniel. Don't worry about that. Just shut it up, seal it off. They'll need it back there. Okay? So that's what he's getting at. This is a way of affirming to him the fact that even though this looks impossible to understand totally, that when you get in the context, it won't. It'll make a lot of sense. We'll know who Cush is. We'll know where Ethiopia is. Thanks, Pete. But a lot of things will make sense that don't make sense right now. So that's what he's saying right here. Don't be concerned about that. And he says, in the end, many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Why did he put that there? Well, because in the end, there will not be a lot of wisdom. That wisdom that comes from God's word, from Daniel and specifically, and maybe some of the other parts of it, there won't be that wisdom because people won't be reading it. Instead, what they'll be reading is just about everything else they can get their hands on. And that's what this knowledge shall increase. There'll be so much speculation at the time about why there is so much evil being unleashed on the world that everyone will just be guessing. And they'll be writing stuff about what they're guessing about. And then no one's going to get it right. Who will get it right? The people who've read these things. These visions have been sealed up for use to be opened to then. That's what he's saying. People will run to and fro. I always get the picture that we talk about people running around with their hair on fire, which is probably not a very sensitive image to use when we're talking about the death of millions of people. But people will be running back and forth saying, it's a picture of urgency. What has gone wrong? Our world has gone insane. What's the answer to this? And humanity will try and take a stab at what happened. And that's this whole knowledge shall increase. But what he's saying is that you need to seal up this book because it's going to be a necessary piece of wisdom when people get there. Then I, Daniel, looked and behold, hey, two others stood next to the river. One on this bank of the stream and one on that bank of the stream. And someone said to the man clothed in linen, the Jesus figure of the river, someone said to the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the stream, they ask a question. You know what the question they ask is? How long shall it be till the end of these wonders? I mean, give us some time scales about this, especially the really brutal parts of it about the suffering and the great tribulation, these troubles. How long will this be? And I heard the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the stream. He raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven and swore by him who lives forever that it would be for a time, times, and half a time. Many translations put in there the word only. Only a time, times, and half a time. This great struggle, tribulation time does have an end to it. There's light at the end of that tunnel. So what is time, times, and half a time? That actually shows up in a lot of places in the Bible. And it's a simple algebra. Time times 1 plus 2 plus a half means 3.5. Everybody agrees on this. Times. Well, 3.5 of what? That's not a calendar. Like, how long is this going to last? 3.5. 3.5 what? Well, if you go look at this Daniel 9 passage, if you're really interested in figuring this out, go look at Daniel 9:27. And what you'll find down there is he talks about this, the week of years at the end of time. That is the 7 years of the end of time. It's the 70th week of Daniel from chapter 9 of Daniel. We looked at that a long time ago. I know we're really pushing back. I can't remember that, Jim. But you go look, because it says in that section about the last 7 years, the week 7 of years at the end, it'll be chopped in half. There'll be a 3.5 and a 3.5. You go look. This is not the only place it shows up. It also shows up in Revelation. So anyway, this seemingly, if you interpret this correctly, it looks like he's saying that the worst of this great tribulation, the horrible, peak horrible, will not go on forever. It'll only last for maybe 3.5 years. Well, peak horrible for 3.5 years is bad enough. Yeah. So the guy, one of those guys on the sides of the river asks, "This is horrible stuff. How long will it go on?" Well, times and a half. So it is limited. It is limited. That we can say that for sure. It's not eternal. It won't go on forever. Times and a half. And then this is what he qualifies as. This is really kind of spooky. And that when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things would be finished. Okay, wait. I thought you said we were going to be rescued. Now you're telling me that this times and a half will go on until what? Until the shattering of the power of the holy people. That's the Jews. The shattering of the power of the holy people. You mean they'll get to their lowest in terms of the oppression? I mean, they'll be powerless? Right. They'll come to the bottom. It'll get so bad it looks like it's the end of everything. But only until the shattering of the power of the holy people. And then all this stuff will end. And that's kind of depressing. And it doesn't sound like very good news. I mean, come on, Michael, what were you supposed to be doing? and yet this is going to persist until that happens. You're just going to have to tuck that away someplace and say, well, what's going on here? This is where a lot of the debate about the end times come. But clearly, it has a lot to do with the holy people, Israel. And this is what I think one of the most fascinating things about this entire thing is that here we have world conquest in process in Daniel 12 from someone who has power that has yet to be seen anywhere in the world. And yet God's people seem to be at the core of the issue. Not only does he set up his camp there, but there's something about completely bringing them to the lowest part of their existence. That's where it's going to go, and then all that suffering stops. Why is it that Israel is in the center of this last chapter of history for mankind? And that's a much better discussion topic. And if you wind it back to the beginning of the Bible, when you see the formation of God's chosen people, with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, that scallywag, Tui, and his sons who become the tribes of Israel, God says to them deliberately, he says, look, I didn't choose you guys because you're much better than everyone else in the world. This is Jim's paraphrase. But I chose you because I need one nation to communicate to the rest of the world that I love it and I want them redeemed from their sin. I want you to be my lead nation to tell the world about who I am. And in so doing, many will come. In Isaiah 42, it talks about the Jews being a light to the Gentiles. That's the light. There is a God who loves mankind. Israel was chosen not because they're great or preferred in any way, but because they were chosen to be spokespeople about the loving kindness of God to a world that needs God. They were meant to be the missionaries to the world about God. So if the Antichrist wants to mess up that message, he's going to aim at taking down the Jews because they're the light to the Gentiles. It repeats it not only in Isaiah 42:6, but it repeats it in Isaiah 49:6. It says the same thing. Go look it up. They're a light to the Gentiles. So clearly, as the Antichrist is trying to take down and conquer God himself. He's going to take down God's messengers, which is the Jews. He's going to take down everyone who's involved, even Christians who he thinks are going to be lights to a world that can find salvation. They can become immune from the repercussions of death, the sting of death, which is sin. I mean, he'll take down everybody he can take down. But in this particular case, he's taking down the Jews. Wow. Until the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things would be finished. And Daniel says, look, I heard, but I did not understand. Yes, Steve. Oh, yeah, the two witnesses. Yeah, and what about the two witnesses in Revelation? They get taken down. And then the resurrection, yeah. So, yeah, this does not mean immune from death. but you don't need to fear the one who can bring death to your body. You need to fear the one who can bring death to your soul. So this is what's going on in reality. And here we have a geopolitical firestorm of someone who wants to take over the world, but he's really in the process of a firestorm of trying to take everything from God himself, including the people who would witness for him, including the people who from ages past have been the light to the world, the Jews. And out of the light to the world comes the seed of Abraham, which is Jesus himself, the light of the world. So anyway, you got to take a really big picture to see all this stuff coming down. But Daniel admits at this point, he says, look, I've seen enough, and I hear it, but I just don't get it. Now, if that's your situation sitting here, join the club. It started with Daniel, and everyone since then has read this and went, okay, I hear this, but I don't get it. Which probably means you are not the intended audience. It's probably sealed up for another audience to come. But you don't know that you're not the audience. Yeah, I mean, all this stuff could transpire. We look at this and say, well, this can't happen for like 100 years. No, this can happen in 2027. And the times and a half right after that. I mean, you don't know. So I'm just saying, if you don't get it now, it's because maybe you're in the wrong time or place. You're not the intended audience in that sense, but you could become the intended audience unwittingly, and then you're going to say, honey, where do we put our Bible? I think I need to read Daniel 12 again because this looks like it's swirling around me. And that's really the admonition in Revelation as well. You need to keep this in your hip pocket. You need to know it exists. You need to wrestle with it right now. But like Daniel says right here, this is Daniel. This is the man. He's saying, I don't get it. I don't get it. And that's an okay response. But that's why I wanted to expose you to it today, because this is a key part of the entire apocalyptic literature in the Bible. We think of Revelation, but if you don't have Daniel in your hip pocket, you're not going to get Revelation too well. Because Daniel is so tightly intertwined with this. God gives Daniel these revelations about the sequence of real kingdoms that are going to come and go and come and go. And at the end, there is a last kingdom, and it will go, and that will be the end of history. And that's what he's trying to tie us to right here. So don't worry if you don't understand. Then I said, well, Lord, what shall be the outcome of these things? So the other guy standing on the bank says, how long is this going to go on? He says, times and a half. Thanks a lot. That helped me a lot. But they sort of get it. So Daniel instead says, no, let's say, how is it going to work out in the end? I mean, I don't get what I've heard, but that's his way of saying, how's it going to work out in the end? What's the end of the story? I mean, is there good news at the end of the story? What shall be the outcome of these things? Let's just skip to the ending. Did they all live happily ever after? Tell me something encouraging. So he asks this, and the man who looks like Jesus says, go your way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. Just don't worry about it. Your job was to write this down and seal it up to the end. So what do you do tomorrow? You go your way. And we've talked about this a lot. When we talk about apocalyptic discussions, about end time stuff, you ask yourself, well, even if I get it completely unwound, what will it change in what I do tomorrow? Well, probably not a lot. It probably won't change a lot of your tomorrow. And that's what he's saying to Daniel. Daniel, just go your way, roll this baby up, stick it in a jar, and the people who need to read it will have it ready. But you just go your way. Well, wait, I asked a question. My question was, how is this going to work out in the end? And you're just telling me, don't worry about it, just go your way? Well, there's more. He says more. Well, many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined, but the wicked shall act wickedly. So in the end, the outcome is there will be people who love righteousness and goodness and love God, and there'll be people who embrace wickedness, and well, there you go. That's not helping me a lot, but it is helping me a little bit, because what it really says is that there is going to be a distinction made between those who are white and refined, that refining might actually take place during that tribulation time. Refining is something metallurgically you do with lots of heat. So, but what he's saying is that, okay, Daniel asked about the outcome. The outcome is there are righteous people and there are wicked people. Now, the righteous, we know, don't make themselves righteous through self-effort, but they find righteousness through appealing to God for his righteousness. We know that through other parts of Scripture. So this isn't people just trying really hard to be good. But we do find out that there is going to be these two cases. Not all of mankind will perish, is what he's saying. Not all of mankind. There are those who love God, who love righteousness, who love goodness. They will not perish and all this stuff. But the ones who embrace wickedness, well, they're just going to act wicked. I say this all the time when we talk about politics. Well, there's wicked people in politics, and you know what they're going to do? They're going to act wickedly. So just get used to the fact that in politics and in geopolitics, there are nasty, fallen people who are wicked, and they're going to act wickedly. So you just shrug your shoulders and say, I can't do much about that. But the good part about what's the outcome, God? What's the outcome? Well, not all are going to go, but the righteous will stick around. They'll be preserved. Well, he does go more on about the outcome question. But none of the wicked will understand. But those who are wise, they'll understand. Again, wise. Why? Because they have wisdom from God. How? Largely through his word, part of it we just read, and other portions as well. So the wise will be clued in. And they'll say, I know where this is going. We don't have to be discouraged. We know that there's an end that's preordained by God. It won't go on forever. It'll just happen for a times and a half. We there's a lot of things we know that can give us hope. And we know this is going to be brought to the end that it needs to be brought to. So everything's actually in control, even though it doesn't look like it. That's what the wise will say. Because they'll say, look, Daniel wrote this down 5 centuries before Jesus. And he got it all right about Greece and about Persia and about all the other stuff. He's got it right about the end as well. So we can just take a deep breath and go our way. Because it's going to happen the way it's written. This is still Jesus, or whoever this is over the river, talking. And from the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits and arrives at the 1333 days. That's why I put that picture of Daniel holding his head again. Because it's like, wait, you're not helping me out here. I asked you what the outcome was, and you told me, don't worry about it. The unwise will be screwballs and they'll be wicked, and the wise will be wise. They'll know God's in control. And then, oh, by the way, I forgot one detail. Here's that detail. What? Okay, let's just slow down a little bit. From the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away. Okay, we do know that from a guy who prefigured the Antichrist, and this is the guy, Antiochus IV, that we celebrate Hanukkah from. He came in to Jerusalem. He trashed the temple and he perverted the temple, and he stopped all the legal things that Moses says you should do at the temple, like sacrifice. He just trashed it all. In fact, he made the temple so unusable for what God wanted it to be used for that Israel could not keep doing what God wanted them to do there. It become nastified. He came in, Antiochus IV came in and he sacrificed a pig in the temple. Bad. He stopped all the regular Jewish sacrifice. Everything stopped. So Antiochus showed us kind of what it may be like. He prefigured it by doing it like a century and a half before Jesus came. This bad Greek Seleucid dude. But he says right here that in the end, this is going to be replayed again. It's going to happen again. So if you don't know what we're talking about, it's called in other places the abomination of desolation. It makes the temple desolate. You can't use it because it's been so putrefied. It's abominable. I mean, it's just unthinkable. So he gives us a little timeline here. So from the point, that's very clear to find that what's going on. From the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away and the abomination that makes desolation, that makes desolate, is set up, that is 1,290 days. Now, if you're a math guy, and you remember we talked about times and a half, 3.5 of somethings, is that the 3.5 somethings? Well, is that like 3.5 years? How many days are there in 3.5 years? Guess what? It's 1,260 days. But this is 1,290. You have to use 360 days in the year because that's how they calculated the year. So, I mean, if you're into this, end time studies, that's kind of an interesting thing, because what he says here in the 1290 is it'll be 3.5 years plus a month. You're not helping me out here. And then after that, 45 days. Oh, okay. Does that make any sense to us? No, because maybe this is meant for another audience who are going to be right in the middle of that, who are going to start ticking off the days. See? It's very easy to start your counting based on when the abomination of desolation happens. We know what that means because Antiochus did it back 100 years before Jesus. We know what that means. So once that starts, then you start making marks on your wall. and this is what's going to transpire. So this is a very detailed accounting for the people who will be in the midst of it to know what's coming down. And I don't know how this is an answer to Daniel's question. So what will be the outcome? Well, you need to start counting days. So just another detail. But here we go. This is the last verse of this vision, and it's the last verse of Daniel. And it's the best advice to us as we look forward into the end of days. What great advice. What great advice. So, go your way till the end, and you shall rest and shall stand in your allotted place at the end of the days. The end. So Daniel's confused by what he's written down. Daniel's confused about what he's put away, sealed up for someone else to read. We read it now 2,500 years after Daniel put it on the page. We read it and go, we're closer to the end and we don't know what's going on. We got a clue a little bit. We understand now geopolitics has changed over the years. We can see a little bit of how this sort of works out, but we don't really know what's going on. So the admonition to Daniel 2,500 years ago, it's exactly the same admonition to us. Come on. What you need to do is go your way till the end. Just whatever God has put in your hands to do from now until the end of the age, or the end of your age, just do that. Because these things are preordained and they're going to happen. They're going to happen. But for those who are involved in it, who will find themselves, neck deep in this stuff, this information is going to be valuable. It's going to be valuable. And it'll be valuable even to those who he claims are going to be the stars in the dark place, who are going to be talking about the righteousness of God in the midst of such grotesque evil. So it's useful, but we have a hard time figuring it out. But he does reassure Daniel, and he says this, you shall rest, which I think he's meaning in the near term, like, I messed up your head, Daniel. You haven't been able to eat for a month. That's how much I've messed up your, but you know what? I'm going to let you rest. So just write it down, put it away, go to the end, rest. But here's the fascinating thing, this last phrase, and you shall stand in your allotted place at the end of the days. So even though we're wrestling over what's going to happen at the end, and we don't know whether we'll be there or whatever, God says, look, I've got the whole thing planned out, and this is going to happen. I can look ahead in history. I can see the evil that's going to happen there. I know it's going to go down. It's not out of control. It's foreseen by me since the beginning of time. Don't worry about it. But you will have a place at that end time. Your allotted place. You will have an allotted place in that end time. How? Is he talking about us too? Well, yeah, because remember he said that at that end time moment, all these people in the dust will be raised? Does that mean that we're going to have some kind of firsthand witness opportunity at the end of time to see what's going on? We might. We don't know what that means. But what he does say to Daniel, and he says to us, is you may not be a major player in what goes down at the end of time, but you do have a place, and I've reserved it for you. It's allotted to you. Don't worry. We'll get there. Just go your way till the end. So I want to encourage you, if this stuff fascinates you, if you want to figure out how to dovetail this, Daniel, with Revelation and with other passages, some great ones in Isaiah as well, you want to put these together. They all talk about a very violent, horrible end to mankind. I mean, there is going to be a battle that is actually happening right now. There's a spiritual happening right now that we cannot see, which is going to culminate in this battle which we can see. And it'll be the end of mankind. And it'll be timely, it'll be perfect. It'll be exactly when it's supposed to happen. It's fascinating to study it, and I've been studying it. The very first book I read after I became a believer that was not the Bible was Hal Lindsey's Late Great Planet Earth. and I read that, and I read it in 2 days. I was so fascinating. And you know, a lot of things that he conjectured in that book about end time stuff has since well, you know, I don't know. There's some, what's that? It's not going to be the Libyans. Yeah. So anyways, there's a lot of things but what that book did was it gave me an awareness that the end times might be like right now. They might be very imminent. They might be right on our doorstep. And according to the passages of the scriptures we see when he talks about the end of days or the last days, it turns out the last days, biblically by definition, happened when the Messiah came the first time. And it finishes when the Messiah comes the second time. So we technically are in the last days right now. We're in the last days. But Hal Lindsey said, you don't understand. You could be in the last days, much further into the last days than you realize. And suddenly for me, the reality of the fact that God has the timeline of mankind prefigured, and what's going to happen is going to happen. Nothing is out of God's control. Everything is known, and it's going to happen the way it's going to happen. And that book gave me that awareness. And every time I come back and I read Daniel and I read Revelation, I realize God's telling us this forward view. And there is a purpose for some people in the audience to see this, maybe even for us, because we might find ourselves in those end times. But what do you do tactically tomorrow? That's the strategy that's going to happen. What do I do tactically tomorrow? Tomorrow morning I wake up, and what do I do in light of the fact that I'm living in the last days? I'll just go my way until the end. Yeah. And what do? I love that picture. You need to be a bright pinprick of light in a very dark place, like a star against the night skies. Because the darkness of this existence is going to get worse. Timothy tells us that. Peter tells us that. I mean, it's going to get worse. The darkness will get dark. And it culminates in these stories right here that caused Daniel to not be able to eat for a month. It's going to get bad. But God leaves us here so that we will be stars of pinpricks of light in an increasingly dark place. And he wants you to talk about the loving kindness of God. He wants you to talk about the fact that even though death will surround us, unjust death surround us, that there is an answer to the problem of death. The answer is, "O death, where is your sting?" You have no sting anymore. Why? Because the sting of death is sin, and sin will cause your soul to die. But God's got a solution to that. And that's the message we have to tell people. There is death all around us, but there is hope in what God has done for us through Christ. And that brings the sting of death to zero. There is no sting of death. There is no sting of death. There's life. Let me give you one more passage because I think this is just such a great way to go out in Daniel. It's such a great way to go out in Daniel. I am so glad Daniel is as confused as I am. But it causes us, it triggers for some of us a great curiosity to try and tie these things together. When will these happen? What's going to go on? It's a fascinating study. So I don't want to discourage you from the study of end time stuff because it really is fascinating. just don't embrace your conclusions too boldly. But keep your mind open. We'll see what happens. And some of us find ourselves in this apocalypse. We just don't know. But one more verse, and this comes out of Isaiah, because Isaiah was also a forward-looking kind of guy. Isaiah 46. Great admonitions to those of us who don't understand what's going on, but understand that God's in control. And so tomorrow I'll just kind of keep walking that way. So this is what Isaiah 46 says, verse 8. This is God speaking in the first person. Remember this and stand firm. Recall it to your minds, you transgressors. Oh, no. What, this is God speaking. Okay, what does he say? Remind yourself of what? Remember the former things of old. That is, remember what I've done on behalf of my people in the past. Just remember that. Well, like what? Well, remember when they were on the edge of that piece of water and the Egyptians were barreling down with their chariots, right? And then God split the water open and caused them to drown and walk across on dry land. And then remember when the chariots came into that dry land and started to cross that Red Sea, then suddenly God closed up the water and they all drowned. You remember? Well, that was me, God's saying. That's what he's saying. So you transgressors, remember the former things of old. I'm God. There is no other. If you have some God you think you're trusting in to save you, you got a problem. There are no other gods. And also, I am God and there is none like me. No one even approaches me. There's none like me. And this is a fascinating apocalyptic kind of declaration. Declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times, things not yet done. Now he's saying, remember just before this, he said, remember what I've done, but now think about this. Think about this. That from the time of the beginning, I was declaring the end. That's what he's saying. When he says declaring the end from the beginning, he doesn't mean, I told you about the beginning and the end. No, he's saying that during the time of the beginning, I declared what the end was. I knew what was going to happen at the end of time. He's in control. And that's exactly what Daniel is describing to us. He's describing to us the end. So God's saying right here, look, if you fear what I've done in the past on behalf of my people Israel, if you fear what the problem with sin and evil is because of what I've done in the past, listen about this. In the past, I told you what's going to happen in the future, and that's coming, and you cannot stop it. I declared the end during the time of the beginning, and during that time of the beginning, from the ancient times, I told you the things that have not yet happened yet. I've told you all these things. So this is God declaring in one fell swoop, I'm in control of the timeline of mankind. And if you're disregarding who I am, the only God who exists, the God who has uber justice and who engages his love for those he loves and who will respond to him, if you're going to disregard that, I need to warn you about the fact that if I did that then, and I have the entire timeline of history foreseen, you've got a problem if you keep ignoring me. If you think you're going to get away with anything, you're not. You're not. From ancient times, things not yet done, saying this, my counsel shall stand. What my will be done. From the ancient times to the future times. That's not an accident, and that's not chaotic, and that's not chance. That's going to happen, he says. My counsel shall stand, and also I will accomplish all my purpose. And that's exactly what Daniel's been trying to tell us. He's given us a glimpse that we don't fully understand about the end times. And that's okay. Daniel didn't either. But we can reassure ourselves of the fact that no matter how chaotic and bad things seem to get, in ancient times, he told us all about that. And it's going to happen. It's just going to happen. God is sovereign. God is not out of control. Even the Antichrist doesn't have power to surprise God. God sees what's going to happen. He sees how it's going to go down. He has mighty helpers engaged that you cannot see, people like Michael and stuff like that. I mean, it's going to go the way it's going to go. So what you need to do, according to the last verse of Daniel, is, well, just go your way and walk to the end. And this will happen. But is it chaotic? Is it out of control? Am I in danger? No, because he'll accomplish his purpose to the very end. To the very end. Jesus prayed in his high priestly prayer in John 17. And he told the apostles, look, I'm leaving. But it's not as bad as you think. I'm leaving. And so as he prays, he asks the Father and says, while I was here, I kept them. I embraced them. I protected them. They're mine like sheep, and I'm the shepherd. I kept them. And then Jesus prays while they're hearing, but now that I'm coming back to you, Father, will you keep them? You keep them and protect them through all this. So in a real sense, in that imagery, he's telling us that even as the world goes to hell and falls apart, he's got you. He's got you. And his intention is to love you and to bring you into his presence and to bring you abundant life. And that's his purpose. And it will not be thwarted even by something as dark and as foreboding as the end of time. So you can stop worrying about it. He's got you. He's got you. He's got you. He's got you. So those of you who are intending evil on my people, look back and see what I did on their behalf back there. And you understand that I've got them out here too as well. That's Daniel. Congratulations, you have survived 17 Sundays on Daniel. But we only scratch the surface. So again, I want to encourage you to go back and look at yourself, wrestle over it. There's just so much great stuff. 4 profound visions that stretch from Daniel's time all the way to the end of time. And this last one, probably the most disturbing. I mean, it caused Daniel to lose sleep and not be able to eat. It's dark. What will happen at the end of mankind is dark. There's just no question around that. But the forces of evil will succumb. Because Jesus said on the cross, it's finished. The battle's done. The battle's done. Okay. We're going to sing one more song and then we'll be out of here. So let me just pray. Oh, that's a hard morning. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Communion. This is why I wanted to tie in communion. See, I do this kind of stuff all the time. Because I wanted to tie it in because as you go forward, the simple thing, just walking forward toward the end, what we need to do is remind ourselves the great price that was paid on your behalf in order to protect you from that mayhem of sin and death that's coming. And that happened on the cross. So let's take this moment to remind ourselves that in these last days, as we approach that time of great ugly evil, that there was, in the face of an even uglier evil during the first century, people who didn't even recognize God in the flesh. And John said he came to his own, and his own didn't even receive him. This is God making more than just a cameo appearance in the history of mankind. This is God himself coming in the flesh and saying, I'm here. I'm here. And what did mankind do? They killed him. But in that death, that was not an accident. That was not unforeseen. In that death, he came so that we might find life and that we might survive the coming apocalypse, might survive the wrath of God which is to come. So while Jesus is in the upper room, he's with his apostles. These are the last moments he'll have time with, a long time to speak with his apostles, and they're celebrating Passover. They're celebrating the entire news about the fact that the blood of the Lamb back during the time of the Exodus is what protected their houses from the wrath of God, which was poured out on the whole region. They're celebrating the fact that they have life because of the sacrifice of that Lamb. And during that celebration, he picks up the bread during that time and symbolically says that this is my body. And this is my body that is broken for you. So we do this in remembrance. And as we follow Daniel's admonition to walk to the end, we also remember that things change. And the new covenant came when the Messiah came the first time, when Jesus came the first time. The new covenant was instantiated, it started. And Jesus says that explicitly and remarkably and amazingly in the middle of this celebration. So as he looks back to the salvation that comes from the blood of that Lamb, he lifts the cup representing that blood. He lifts that cup representing that blood that saved. He says, but you don't understand. That was the blood that saved in the old covenant. There is a blood now that saves in the new covenant. And he raises up this cup and he says, this is the new covenant in my blood. Let's do this in remembrance of him. So, Father, as we close out this morning, we come to this great celebration in food. We remind ourselves again that there is no chaos in this place, that you are in control. You have not distanced yourself from us. You've anticipated the need for a solution to sin, and you've brought it in your Son. You're not out of control. And so, Father, we thank you that you have come to us and you've invited us into your kingdom. And as we pled with you to be part of this life that you promise, you reveal to us that you paid the price for our sin and allow us to come forth clean with the same righteousness as Jesus himself. And as such, you qualify us to take part in your kingdom. And Lord, as we close out this season of looking at Daniel and these very dark endings that are happening, Lord, we're not the last ones to mention that this place seems to be full of evil. You know it's full of evil. Jesus knew this place was full of evil when he prayed for the apostles in that upper room and said, I'm not praying, Father, that you take them out of this place. But Father, we want to be between now and that time. We want to be those pinpricks of light in an overwhelmingly dark place. And Father, we want those who despair, who sit in that darkness and the shadow of that death, and pray that you'd make us messengers of great hope because of what Jesus has done on their behalf and on our behalf. Make us lights in this place that is so discouraged. And Father, as that discouragement builds and snowballs toward the end of time and becomes more ugly than we can ever imagine, we pray that your Spirit would speak through us in profound ways to bring about change in the lives of people who despair and have no hope. And Lord, we live amongst a lot of people who do despair and have no hope. So use us, we pray, in order to convey this great invitation from the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, who wants us to join him in this great feast at the end of time as we celebrate the coming of the kingdom of God. So thank you for this morning, and thank you for the news that the sting of death is now gone because of Jesus. So thanks in Jesus' name. Amen.